This episode of the Fairway to Retail Success is brought to you by AGM vendor partner T-Commerce, the online retail solution for golf facilities. Give your members 24/7 shopping with no inventory risk. Visit tcommerce.shop to learn more. Now, back to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fairway to Retail Success and AGM podcast. I'm your host, Justine Cook. Today's episode is a very special one. I'm honored to be joined by two individuals who helped shape the very foundation of the Association of Golf Merchandisers more than 35 years ago, Jacquemoud, and Brett Graham. Jackie and Brett were two of the founding members of the Association of Golf Merchandisers, helping launch the organization that so many of us rely on today for education, networking, and professional growth. Together with other early leaders in the industry, they saw an opportunity to bring golf merchandisers together, create a community, and elevate the profession in a way that simply didn't exist at the time. In today's conversation, we'll be stepping back in time to hear how both Jackie and Brett found their way into golf retail, what inspired them in creating the AGM, and what those early days of building the organization looked like. We'll also talk about how the industry has evolved over the past 3 decades, the impact the AGM has had, and the lessons they would pass along to the next generation of golf merchandisers. Jackie, Brett, thank you both so much for being here today. I'm really excited to have you join us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We're excited about being here as well.
So, I'd love for you both to share a little bit more on your path into golf retail, how you got started in the industry, and what that was like getting started.
I started from the ground up in retail, started with a mass merchant here locally in Las Vegas at customer service, and then eventually was working at the limited stores as an assistant manager when one of the golf pros from the Desert Inn waltzed in, and he had been trying to recruit some help with retail because he understood there was a need for somebody who understood that part of the business. And he brought me in, and I was the proverbial shop girl for several years before being elevated to the buying position. And then it was an interesting process for sure. And to be honest, I really enjoyed it. Those are the best days of my career, were those early days, because I was up to my elbows in so many things that I really enjoyed, and just teaching myself and the people around me. And overall, the biggest part of that was learning the business. And it was wonderful.
Yeah, I think it was wonderful too. I started out at Saks Fifth Avenue after college, and it was a recession at the time, an oil recession, and I lived in the Midwest, and I ended up working on the sales floor at Saks Fifth Avenue. That's the only job I could get. And I probably learned more in that year from this woman named Alita Anthony. She taught me Retail 1, 2, 3. And then I moved to Arizona and started working in the buying offices at Goldwater's department store, which was a chain of about, I think they had 9 stores at the time. And I worked in their buying offices, but I was hired on as a secretary, and I could not type. I mean, still a terrible typist, but they put up with me, and I worked for the divisionals who ran divisions of all 9 stores. And I learned a lot from them as well, but I wanted a lot more in my career. So I sent resumes out, and Gainey Ranch was looking for a merchandise manager. So I went in there, and it was kind of like fake it till you make it. I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Oh, I can do this. And, oh, yeah, of course, I can do all of that. And I really had absolutely very little skills in buying. I knew how to analyze inventory, but not really. I didn't have a clue. But I think they kind of knew it when they hired me. Dan Desmond hired me, and with the final say from the president of our development company. And I just started, I just dove in, and like Jackie, it was one of the happiest times that I remember of me being in the industry, because everything was new, and I felt like the people were kind. And both Jackie and I talked about that golf retailing is a little softer environment than regular retail. And you're out on these you're in these golf shops and you're looking out at green grass. And so to me, it was a super exciting time. My company I worked for sent me all over to look at stores that other people had done so I could get an idea. And one of the biggest things I did was I went over to Palm Desert and looked at these buyers like Jody Cook and Audrey Tashman, and they were just inspirational to me, especially Jody. Her stores were just beautiful, and she did things more than just the traditional golf store. And it really got my creative juices going. So it was a really happy time for me too.
That's amazing and so interesting that you both very first started in mainstream retail with the Limited and Saks Fifth Avenue. So I think that that's interesting having that start on that more mainstream piece of the industry.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
fact, Brett reminds me that it was the Limited that taught me those merchandising skills that I was able to transfer into the frontline merchandising function. Now, the buying thing was a whole different story, but at least I got the shop looking nice.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I learned from Alita Anthony was it's one thing to get it in the store, but it's a whole nother thing to move it out. And there's skills and training involved with really moving out merchandise effectively. And that's really a gift she gave me because I knew how to move product out the door and I knew how to get a team together and create my team and really give them the tools that I learned to move the product out the door. I think that was a really valuable lesson. And of course, I hated it the whole time. I didn't want to stand on the sales floor at Saks Fifth Avenue. I thought I was way better than that. And really turns out I wasn't. It was a really great experience. All of it was a great learning experience.
Amazing. So from there, as you were both getting started, what eventually led to the inspiration in starting the Association of Golf Merchandisers? How did that idea come about? Walk us through that story of where the AGM originated.
Brett, that's you.
It was a combination of two things. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the environment back then. I think it's very different than it is today, and I think the industry has evolved really beautifully. But back then, the term shop girl was used all the time. It was a little confusing for me because I was hired in from the development company I worked for as a merchandise manager. So they told me specifically when they hired me in that I was in center. And that was very different than the way I was being treated on the floor. So it was a little bit confusing to have that mandate from the development company, but yet when I was on the floor, it was like, you're the girl in the shop. And so that kind of struck me as a kind of an oxymoron where you got one message, but you're in the middle of another message. And so that was an interesting thing. And I know that the people before us had really fought hard. And I'm gonna like Jody Cook, Audrey Tashman, Dottie DeLacy, these people, Craig Williamson,
Lonnie
they,
Collins.
Lonnie, yeah, they had been in the industry long before Jackie and I, and they really fought hard for their jobs. They were excellent at what they did, and they really paved the way for us. So Jackie and I were on a cusp of something. You could feel the momentum, don't you think,
Oh,
Jackie?
absolutely.
You could feel that things were changing because they'd fought the hard battles because really they were running a lot of inventory, a lot of big numbers, and I'm not sure they really got the recognition that they should have for it. So we caught a ride onto the next wave. And it became probably clear. I think there was an Orlando show. So right before the Orlando show, my father had given me, my parents used to give me newspaper articles to read to improve myself. It's something they did since I was like 12. And my father had cut out an article about it. How do you network inside it? How do you create your name inside your industry? And how do you network? And they said, join your association. And if you don't have one, start one. And the next week or so, I just happened to be in Orlando and I was with Marianne Greb, who also was one of the founding members. And we were standing in front of a sign that said a particular class for PGA only. And I remember thinking I'd like to go to that class. And I think Marianne said something like, I wish we were inside of there. And we couldn't get in. And I think then it was really Marianne had said, this isn't right. We should have a forum. We should have a place to go. And I'm like, yeah. And then that article kind of hit at the same time. So I felt like I had my mandate when we came back. And then, so that was in January. And then by September, I think it's early September or late August, right, Jackie?
Yeah, I think it was August, September of
Yeah, they
1989,
had
right?
a West Coast show in Long Beach. This is really way back, but they had a West Coast show. And by this time, I had contacted the 9 original people, and it was, Justine, it was like so fast because I call them and I'd say, I think this is a need, and they'd be like, I'm in. Like you didn't even finish a sentence, and they would be like, absolutely, on whatever you need. So following a show on the West Coast, everybody came, all 9 people. I think they even flew in for the show that they probably would have not gone to. And we had a meeting in the bar in Long Beach. I think it was in a Hyatt, wasn't it? Or something like Sheridan or something.
Yeah, I'll remember in a second, but yeah.
Anyway, the bar was like, there was a walkway and then there was the bar, and the bar was very visible to anyone walking by. And so we had a time that the meeting was going to start, and we all sat down, and it was crazy because this represented so much buying power in the industry. And the looks we got as people, as particularly the owners of the companies walked by, they were like, oh, what is going on over there? And that was fun.
Yeah,
We had a
that
good
was
time with that. And I think Jackie noticed a salesman.
Yeah, no, so we were in the part of the bar where you could sit, and there were lounging areas, and then there was the actual bar where everybody was standing there getting their drinks, and there was a line of sales reps. And one of them was a really high profile guy, and I'm sorry, so high profile that I can't remember his name, but he was from Scotland, and he had a really heavy brogue, and I could just see him mouthing comments to the sales reps that are next to him. And so to Brett's point, we definitely caused a buzz. It was palpable, it was visible, and it was like, oh my gosh, you could feel how important that moment was.
You could feel the change.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think if you talk to the rest of the 9, they would say the same thing. We actually had a really good time with it. We were laughing about it. Oh, this is getting good. And then what happened after that was we needed rules of engagement. So we created bylaws. I got an attorney. So they gave me dues. Okay, that was the first thing. I needed money. Okay, so they gave me dues, and I can't remember what it was, like $200 or $300 or something. And so I had a limited amount of money, and I knew we needed the bylaws. So we got in, my dad had a buddy who was an attorney who looked at it for free. It was all of that. And they were really sweet about it. I think I did end up paying him a couple $100, but I didn't have that much money, right? At this time, things are rolling. We're getting ready for the next Orlando show. And that's when we really wanted to get a lot more buyers, because we knew that this 9 represented a ton of buying power and could be a good face for the association, but we really couldn't, we needed all of them. So we started Golf Shop. Golf Digest had a subsidiary called Golf Shop Operations, which was an industry magazine. And they got on board with us. There was a gal named Eileen who was one of the writers who hooked into what we were doing right away. So they were also helping us on a super more national level, because I could call them or write articles for them. I told them, I'll do whatever you guys need. Just give this association a push. And they did. They were amazing. And so by the next Orlando, we had I don't know how many people we had at the meeting, but we had a lot of buyers there at that point. But in the middle of it, there was a lot of ups and downs. For example, I received a cease and desist from the PGA,
Wow.
and it just, I was panicked. What happened was our name was Professional
Golf
PB,
Buyers Association,
yeah,
yeah,
Professional
PGBA.
Golf Buyers Association. And they didn't like the name, and it really was super close to the
Mhm.
PGA. So we solved the problem and didn't get sued by the PGA by changing the name. And it worked out great because it's separate, it's not confusing, and they were probably right. But I panicked about that because I thought, oh, this is going to kill us right now. So we lived through that. And then the other thing that became very clear was we didn't have enough money to support ourselves and to do the kind of educational programs that we wanted to. And we also wanted to create a less, like a seamless line with our vendors. We wanted them to be included in the association. And because we felt like that was the way for the industry to thrive, if we were all in there together. So that's when we created the affiliate program. And so the affiliate program ended up being, I think we created that at the following Orlando show. And that became super controversial. And I mean, there were some vendors that were just amazing. And I'm just going to call them out. Antigua, Ron McPherson, and Tom Dooley. That was the first check I received. And then the second check was Imperial Headwear. I can't remember the third, but there were like probably 5 or 6 companies that were so on board and so supportive, and just I felt so good about it. And then there was some that really didn't like it. And they just, and so I'll tell you a funny story. So there was one gentleman who owned a women's wear company, and he really didn't like it, and he was very vocal about it. And and so of course it got back to me that he was very vocal about it. He didn't like it. It's a big problem. And he's calling people, telling people he doesn't like it. And it was a big thing. So I thought about it for a while, and I thought, I'm just going to call the biggest hitter I have, which was Lonnie Collins, who passed away, but she was just the most amazing woman, most amazing buyer, amazing person. And I was like, Lonnie, first of all, she would take my call immediately. In 3 minutes, she'd call me back, and nobody could ever get her on the phone, that's all of the first 9 would call me back in seconds if I needed help. And I want to publicly thank them for that. But Lonnie called, and I'm like, I just don't know what to do. I hear this is going around. And she goes, let me call you back in 10 minutes. 6 minutes later, I got a call, and she goes, it's done. Check's in the mail. Are you having any other problems? And I'm like, no, that was my biggest problem. She goes, okay, you call me back if you have any other problems, and I'll help you work it out. And that was it. Never had an issue, never again. And it was the support we got from the vendors and from the buyers was so strong, and from the media, from Golf Shop Operations. And that's really how we got launched.
Amazing. So you started with those 9 individuals, which is so amazing. How did you know them essentially? Was it from attending shows together? Were they more local, or were there farther away folks that you saw in your travels? How did those connections kind of form?
My reps helped me a
Okay.
lot. Okay. That was one. All right. And then the owners of the companies would help me too. They knew the ones that were really supportive to us, they knew who to call. And then we knew, like with Golf Shop Operations, we knew, like I had heard of Jackie, I'd heard of Lonnie. Jody Cook would talk about Lonnie when I would talk to her. I think organically all around us, we knew. And then you just think about the big clubs like Pinehurst or the DI where Jackie was, or the Hawaii courses were the ones that were really on fire. They bought a lot of inventory and they sold a lot of inventory because when you're on vacation, those quarters end up being, or dollars end up being quarters. The Hawaii group was really instrumental in helping us move this thing forward. Debbie Chow and her assistant,
Craig Williamson,
Craig
Lonnie.
Williamson,
Mhm.
Lonnie.
Yeah.
So that's how we got that first group together. And there were a few that were at major courses that weren't ready to sign on. They just wanted to see what we made of it before they, and I also appreciate that because those are really high profile locations and high profile jobs. And I can see where they wouldn't want to be a part of something if they didn't like the direction. But we put the proof in it. We set out to be an educational group to help the industry. And what I was so thrilled about when we connected again with Jennifer a few years ago was that you guys are still using educate, elevate, and enhance. That's really important because that's really what the core mission that the 9 of us set up was. That's what our vision was. And I'm just thrilled that's still there.
Absolutely. We include that in each and every one of our educational seminars, that those pillars are always there.
Nice.
Glad. They were really thought out. It wasn't haphazard. We discussed it. We made changes to them. All of the stuff in the very beginning, it was as strategic as we were able to do with the 9 of us.
Very amazing, amazing. And in those early years, how did you all engage as a group? Were things anchored around the Orlando show, or you mentioned the Long Beach show? Did you do things more regionally as well? How did you organize that in the early years?
Well, in the very beginning, it was just the major shows because that's it. We didn't have Zoom and I do think we
Right.
conference called. I
Okay.
remember we conference called through on the landlines if there was an issue, or sometimes I'd bring like 3 or 4 together if I had a problem that we needed to resolve, and then I could send it. But there was an email back then. It was either you got something in the mail or you made a phone call. So pretty much we had to wait for the shows. And what became drag was some of the buyers were usually went to Orlando, but they didn't go to the West Coast show. Jackie was hit and miss in Orlando and would hit all the West Coast shows. So it was like you had to cover people off if they weren't there.
Mm.
It wasn't as easy as it is now. I wish we would have had Zoom. It would have been so much easier.
So, from the time that the AGM was founded over 30 years ago, what changes in golf retail have stood out the most to you from then until today? I know that's pretty broad, but happy to get your insight on that.
Yeah, I've actually given that a lot of thought, and I've been away from it now for over 10 years. So I'm not sure I can comment on what's happening right now, but I would say that having the merchandising position, however it's defined, being an integral part of a team in a golf shop. It was always the golf pro trying to do it, and his wife would come in, or they would hire the shop girl and on. But I think once like golf shop operations started recognizing facilities for not just the golf pro who is the 100 best, but also the merchandiser, that all of a sudden that kind of gave that merchandiser some, I don't know,
Credibility.
credibility. That's the word. Yes, that gave them credibility, and that in itself elevated that position. So now when you go into a shop, you know that there is a merchandiser on the team, or you hope that there are, or even if it's not a specific person, if it's a really tiny shop and it is just the golf pro and his wife, somebody in that shop is paying attention to that part of the business in a way that they probably didn't know how to do 30 years ago.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. It's more standard now than it was before. I've talked to Jackie a lot about probably the thing that I'm most proud of the AGM is all of the positions, the jobs that are out there for merchandisers and merchandise managers. And that was not happening when we started. And I think that's the one thing that I feel the best about for the years that we were involved in it and trying to make it grow for sure. One thing I did want to talk about when I first started, most of it, and this may be the case as well now, but most of the systems that we were on back then, inventory systems, were on a cost basis because they came from food and beverage. So the club would buy one system
Yeah.
and you were given the afterthought system. You weren't given a retail system that actually helps you calculate markdowns, helps you age product. And because of that, all of the inventory was put into the system at cost. An effective stock plan is at retail, and that helps you age your inventory and track your markdowns. Well, nobody in the industry had any ability to do that. And that was running against us in terms of how the businesses could be operated, because there was a lot of guessing with it, and you had to really be on top of your markdowns to clean your inventory through, and you really never got a really good handle on your actual turnover. I know this all sounds a little technical, but it's impossible to do an open to buy without doing a stock plan. And a stock plan done properly is at retail. So the industry, because the systems were bought for food and beverage, it was really like, I'm actually really impressed with how everybody was managing around that and trying to run their businesses. And some of these businesses were quite large. Like at the time, I remember McGaney, we did about 1.2 million, and that was back in the 80s, the revenue a year. But I know the Hawaii courses were way up there, way farther than that. And how they were managing that level of inventory on a cost basis system, I mean, hats off to all of these people that were trying to make things work with the tools that they were given, but they really weren't adequate retail tools that we all should have had.
That's funny. That reminds me, I was just telling Brett the other day when I first started, which was I started in the golf business about 10 years before the AGM was founded. And so this was probably in 1980 that I started managing the inventory myself. And it was mostly pencil and a yellow pad, really, at the very beginning. And then we were fortunate enough to get a handicap computer, a gin computer in the shop. And so me being curious, I went over and I found that I could go behind the scenes of the GIN program and go in and I was able to create a database of our inventory on our handicap computer and produce spreadsheets that kind of gave us at least a visual of what was going on. Now, there was no calculating going on or checking turnover or open. None of that was happening. It was really just a tracking system. But I think it's important just to illustrate what Brett's talking about. It's like we really had to scramble to figure out how to properly keep track of what money we were spending. We were spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
The Desert Inn was a very high volume golf shop. It was a daunting task. I thank the gin people for giving us the free computer for our handicap.
Honestly, you're charged to run a business. It was funny because you're charged to run a business. Half the people are calling you shop girls. Your volumes, at least in Jackie's and my worlds, were pretty substantial for that time period. And we're on these systems that are just ridiculous. Like on a good day, you can't really evaluate what you're doing. Honestly, it would be just easier to go look around the store and go, I did pretty good on that one.
That happened a lot.
Like applauded companies like RMSA. I know I'm probably using a bunch of names. I don't know if Becky's retired yet, but Becky Adams, I know she got on RMSA early on, and at that point, I was almost transitioning into wholesale. But those companies say, if you're doing volume, you almost can't afford not to use those companies if you're not on a retail system. If your company puts you on the F&B system, push to get a better system. Now, I know the private clubs are probably like, oh, they'll never let me do that. And I can understand that. The private club situation is very different from public fee and resort. But still, managing the markdowns, the turnover, it's really critical, whatever size your business is.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. And touching on the more professional development, networking opportunities piece of the AGM, how do you feel the AGM really shaped that from the start as far as networking, professional development, maybe career advancement as well for folks?
First of all, the whole thing was about networking. It was about education and networking. We felt like we wanted to contribute to the industry, right? Keep the industry healthy. That's education. And then vendor programs, trying to create really good relationships with your vendors. And then the networking aspect of it is we felt like you learn so much when you're chatting, you're talking to somebody. So one of the first thing we did was the cocktail party in Orlando. And that became just a really fun thing for all of us to go. We all became friends. And I was incredibly grateful for the help that I got from particularly the first 9. And then after that, probably the first 25 were calling me, trying to help, doing things. And so seeing them once or twice a year was such a big deal. And then after we did the cocktail party, we invited the vendors. That gave them the chance to meet and greet. And then after that, we started doing more educational programs at the shows and then started into regional educational programs. So we started up here and worked our way down. And I think the networking is critical. Everybody works better when you're communicating. Just period.
And the other thing about that too is that those networking opportunities became business opportunities because not only are you engaged with other buyers, which was the best part of my years with the AGM was the buyers, but you develop relationships with the sales reps and the company owners would show up. So you had a direct line into the companies that you were going to be dealing with. And it gave you such an advantage in how to negotiate and how to do your business with those guys. And then those pre-show cocktail parties turned into the product preview night. So that becomes also a revenue generator for the organization,
Yes,
doesn't it?
yes.
It all evolved, I think, the way it was supposed to.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
cool to hear. That was the origins of our much loved product preview reception that we still
Exactly.
host every year in Orlando. We had our
so
biggest
glad.
one this January. We had well over 100 vendors there. It
Nice.
was very busy evening. So glad to hear how that kind of naturally formed when you all were getting started.
Yeah,
Well,
that
I
is.
can tell you that it started in a bar in Long Beach.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. So I know Brett touched on being really proud of all the jobs that have been created in the industry and that exist now, which is so incredible. Are there any other milestones or initiatives in the history of the AGM that you are also especially proud of? Maybe anything we didn't touch on yet?
I'm going to toot Brett's horn for her for a second because one of the best and most useful achievements, in my opinion, was the merchandise manual. And I know how hard she worked on that. I know there were many hours devoted to that, and there was a lot of collaboration with buyers and vendors in getting that done. But I ended up looking at that thing so often, and I can't take credit for one verb in that whole book, but I think that to me is something to be really looked at as an important part of our contribution to the industry.
I got a lot of help from the affiliates on that. A lot. Yeah. We reached out and we were like, we need help on this. And a lot of the companies came forward and said, what can I do? And came back with sections of it. But it was a lot of work. Let's put it this way, I wouldn't sign up again. I don't think. But what was happening was the buyers that were in regions that we weren't able to support for educational programs, because growing an organization like this takes time. They were like, what am I going to get for my dues? And it was a valid question. And so that's when we came up with, we need to have something that concrete that they can have that makes them feel like if they're not in an area where there's a regional seminar, that they can get some value. Because a lot of the buyers, when we created the manual, we were at that point where our membership was including a lot of smaller buyers that couldn't afford to go to Orlando. The big stuff's in Orlando, so they felt like, why am I doing this? I'm not getting anything. And so we were trying to figure out ways to reach out to them and give them a bang for their buck as well and get the benefits of the AGM.
Amazing. And for today's golf retailers, maybe folks getting started in their careers or just earlier along that journey, what lessons would you pass along to them from your experiences?
Yeah, as I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, I am not there now, but my sense is that if somebody's coming into the golf shop, they're probably still coming from either retail or from a professional golfer kind of route. I guess my first thought would be that we need to respect the game itself as being the source of our business. And what that does, it just puts an umbrella over all of the people that are involved in it. So you respect the golf pro who maybe didn't really spend time learning about merchandising, and he's not going to understand everything that you have to tell him if you do happen to know more than he does. But respect the fact that he's running this business that needs you. And I think you'll in turn get that respect in return. So that would be my top line advice, is just respect for the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really great one. I would say forgive yourself. Jackie and I, we have so many stories
My
of
gosh.
times that we made mistakes, whether inadvertently or whether it was just stupid. And fortunately, we were in high traffic stores and were able to fix the mistakes we made. But honestly, I would forgive myself because a job requires you to push a little bit and to do some new things and to learn. And if you're not doing that, are you really enjoying your job? I don't know. But I think that learn and push a little bit and then forgive yourself if you make a mistake. It's okay. Pretty much anybody in the AGM, any mistake that's made, you could pick up the phone and somebody could help you out of that mistake. I guarantee it. And we're not even in the industry anymore, but honestly, I know the talent level that was in it when I was in it. And just to have that ability to go, I think I need to call a bigger gun than this to help me out with this. And they'll be like, oh, I did that back, blah, 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 and this is what you need to do, and blah, blah, blah. It's all going to work out. And your career's not over. Keep pressing. So I would forgive myself a little bit.
That's such great advice. I think sometimes that's the best way to learn is from taking a risk, taking a chance. Maybe it works out something great for your shop and sometimes it doesn't, but I think that's the best way to learn and you don't know until you try.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fine line too, buyer's walk, because it's such a soft industry that you like your reps, you like your the people that you're working with, and you still have to maintain good boundaries with them because you can get overbought easily. It's just the way it is. I was telling Jackie about a story that I had earlier this week, but I would by this time I was a very experienced buyer. Like, I had no business doing this. And I usually tried to avoid vendor dinners and things unless I knew the owner or unless they helped me with the AGM. And then I'd be like, okay. But there was a company out of Kansas City. They may still be out of Kansas City. I'm not sure. And I am from Lawrence, Kansas, which is very close to Kansas City. And they called and they said, hey, we'd like to fly you in and spend the night and then work the line. And there were several other buyers that I knew that had done that. And they really were touting how nice it was to be able to get out of the shop, get in a quiet room, see the entire line. And I was doing really well with the line. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I'm going to break my cardinal rule and do it. And then I can go see my Aunt Sue. I really just wanted to see my Aunt Sue. So I went up there and they put me up in a beautiful hotel, the Raphael, on the plaza, which is one. And the next day I get in there and it worked. What they did worked because I bought, oh my gosh, that order was humongous. And I walked out of there and I thought, I'm pretty sure I can do it. But I wasn't like, okay, that's a good, reasonable order. I walked out thinking, I'm pretty sure I can do it. That's not a good way to walk out of any appointment. So the merchandise the merchandise starts coming in and I'm like, oh my goodness, what did I do? I can never ever fall for that again. Some buyers have a great deal of restraint. I clearly didn't in that setting. It was just horrible. But I got really super lucky because that particular year, the Hyatt, which was just across the street from our shop, was at 90% for like 2.5 months. So I ended up blowing out of the inventory and it all worked out great. And I'm actually glad I had the inventory, but it was a lesson that I learned and I had to forgive myself for that. You just get over it. It wasn't a wise move, but you did it anyway.
That's amazing. You both have such fun stories from your time in the industry. I can feel the thinking about the energy in that room, like you said, when the nine of you first gathered. It makes me think of the gatherings we have today at places like Orlando and all that. And it's always so special when buyers gather together in our industry or sales reps or with our vendor partners.
Can I just say one thing
Yeah,
before
of
we
course.
leave? It's one thing, and I'm so grateful to all of the buyers at the AGM that supported us when we were getting going, particularly that first nine. They were amazing. Just, I can't tell you how they helped me and push this thing forward. It would have never happened had I not had the support of these people. But it's one thing to start it, and then it's another thing to run it and
Mm.
to grow it and to grow it to where people still love it to this day. And there's a lot with that. Sometimes programs work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you get a disgruntled member, sometimes you get a disgruntled affiliate. Sometimes an event doesn't work out quite like you think or you'd like to. And I think the real heroes are the ones like you, Justine, Jennifer, Ken, that get up every morning and push it forward in not these broad brushes that Jackie and I did, but the everyday, all the time. And I want to thank Maggie Arndt. She was the first hire that we had to help us. She was the same. She pushed it forward. And then Desan pushed it forward further and in a different way. And I think change is good. And I think you guys should be recognized because it's exciting and fun to start something like this. But the day in and day out, it can be a grind, and you guys deserve a lot of credit for that.
Here, I agree completely with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really inspiring to talk with you both as being founding members. So, really special and such a special community overall of everyone who's been involved, whether the nine with you or vendors who have helped along the way. I know some of the ones you mentioned are still AGM vendor partners today, like Antigua and Imperial and some of
Good.
those folks. So, very
Yeah,
special connections.
yeah, Jackie, can you remember the other ones, the top five?
Oh my gosh.
I wish I
Uh,
could, but those people were they were equally as beneficial to us as the buyers. So
Right.
hats off to them as well
Yeah,
for recognizing that it could be something that could really help the industry. But hats
absolutely.
off to the PGA, because
yeah.
they got on board after the cease and desist, which was so scary. But after that, they got on board and ended up partnering on many things. They encouraged the pros to go. And I think that is really the vision that we all wanted, was a forum for not segregated to just buyers, but to help everyone lift itself up.
Absolutely. Anything else to add before we wrap up? I feel
Yeah,
like
no, I really enjoyed actually rehearing some of these stories and rehearing how the organization started because Brett truly was the pioneer and the standard bearer from the very beginning. So she deserves all the credit
Oh,
for
stop. No
pushing it
way.
forward. No, she definitely does.
No,
Aw,
no. I want to say something about the AGM for me. I am really proud of all these jobs that it created, and I'm also really proud that you guys helped to educate, elevate, and enhance. But the biggest thing that I got out of the AGM was my friendship with Jackie and another woman named Cindy Chazanal. And we all met in 1989 when this whole thing was starting. And we are best friends to this day. And honestly, I don't know how my life would have been shaped without them. So I think it's not just about business, but it's about the people that you meet along the way that become lifelong friends.
Absolutely. So glad to hear that. I know that's still the case for our members today. They've met great friends in the industry and hopefully that lasts a lifetime as well. So thank you both so much. It was so lovely and inspiring to chat with you both and hopefully here's to another 35 years and more ahead of us of great
Absolutely.
things at the AGM and we wouldn't be here truly without you both. So thank you
Thank
and
you.
the other 7 that were part of your original group of 9. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Fairway to Retail Success. Thank you for being a member of the AGM and member of our community. And we look forward to having you join us again in an upcoming episode. Take care, everyone.